helping me out with these technical difficulties here. I put together this little slideshow. It's relatively all-encompassing while hopefully remaining relatively brief. Do you guys see me, or are you just seeing the screen share there?
We see you and the screen.
Excellent. Sounds great. So my name is Ingrid Schindall. I have been in the fine art printmaking game since 2007. I made my first lino cut in high school and really never looked back. So here you can see some of the fun things that I've been able to start along the way. I started Nocturnal Press, which is our sort of retail arm, in 2012. And then I started my Studio IS projects down here in Fort Lauderdale in 2014. We started publishing artist books in 2015 through the Existent Books name. And then I started the Small Press Fair Fort Lauderdale in 2016 with my co-founder, Sarah Michelle Rupert. So it's a fair to bring everybody together. I'll talk more about all this later. And then Tropic Bound, which was established in 2020, but our first fair is actually going to be next year in 2022. So, you know, lots of things to sort of make this dream come to life. And I'm a Florida native. I was born and raised in Delray Beach. I went to school at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. And I moved back here to set up my studio. So it's been a fun adventure and a relatively straightforward one compared to some other people's stories. But we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. I studied printmaking with a concentration in book arts. While I was there, I learned a lot about, you know, sort of the big four printmaking techniques: screen printing, relief printing, intaglio, lithography. And I was very fortunate to work for our Globe Collection and Press, as well as the Dolphin Press and Print. Globe Collection is a historic collection of wood type. It's a poster shop that has been around since the early 1900s that Micah acquired while I was a senior at Micah. And Globe has really done a lot for Micah and Baltimore and everything in general, just to really bring up sort of the identity and the level and sort of the pride in the school. So I was able to help with moving that collection to Micah, as well as our first collaboration with Trenton Doyle Hancock, which some of you may have heard of. He's a really great and really well-known artist. And while I was a senior, I was able to be sort of the lead collaborator on that project. So my role was to sort of make sure that Trenton had everything that he needed, that we were doing all of the different print pieces that he needed to see, and that he was comfortable in the studio for the entire time. And working in that collaborative role at Micah was actually a big part of what got me on sort of the rest of the track that I took. So while in my last semester, the Baltimore Museum of Art had their biennial print fair. And part of my responsibilities as the coordinator there was to actually help with selling those prints that we made with Trenton. And while I was at the Baltimore Museum of Art print fair, we met David Kroot, who runs a studio in Johannesburg, South Africa called David Kroot Projects. And if you want to flip to the next slide, David came over to the table and he was talking to my boss, Gail Deary, and saying, "Oh, Gail, you have to send some of your students down to South Africa. Maybe we can do an exchange or something like that." And so I, of course, raised my hand. I was like, "I'll go." You know, I just so happened to be standing at the table at the time. And David's like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's stay in touch. And so after graduating, I kept in touch and kept sort of emailing them and saying, you know, when do you guys want me to come? What would be a good time? And I actually wound up going to David Kroot Projects in South Africa in Johannesburg for 3 months in 2013. And there I was an apprentice printer and a book collaborator. So Up on the top, you can see me working with Senzo Shibano. So that was when we were teaching a bookbinding workshop, but then I actually wound up editioning several of Senzo's prints. You can see those on the bottom left there. That's his Nelson Mandela prints. So I editioned those in 3 different colors while I was there. And then the really sort of big fun project that I got to work on while I was there was a fine art pop-up book with Stephen Hobbs. And Stephen is this really incredible artist. He's sort of an architect turned artist with big personality, big artwork, big dreams. And so for the 3 months that I was there, we developed a fine art pop-up book and actually editioned it while I was there. And David Kroop Projects didn't have screen printing facilities. They're a printmaking studio, but they specialize in lino cuts and intaglio. And while I was there, I set up sort of a screen printing rig. So we got the screens burned at a local screen shop, and I set up sort of hinge clamps and some pins and tabs, and we ran the whole edition in 2 printing sessions. And then it was a matter of sort of cutting everything out and assembling it. And by the time I left, all they had to do was assemble the edition. The edition actually wound up in the Smithsonian Museum as well as the National Gallery of Art. So that book has been, as well as the Jack Ginsberg collection in South Africa. So it's been an incredibly successful project. And it was one of sort of the big book arts projects of that sort of time in South Africa. So that was another extremely encouraging collaborative process. So when I got back to Baltimore, you're gonna pop to the next slide here, I found a studio with my friend who is a woodworker in a basement in Baltimore. You can see it on the left there. This is right when we sort of started to pull it apart. It had been a church in the 80s, and it was in a basement in Mount Vernon, Baltimore, right across from an Ethiopian restaurant, delicious Ethiopian restaurant. And so the first thing I did, of course, was tear out walls and staple plastic sheeting to the ceiling so that the crumbling ceiling wouldn't come down on us. And, you know, I was paying $250 a month for about 1,000 square feet, which was incredible and very affordable for just keeping my practice going. You know, this is about a year after graduating from MICA with my degree. And I had some limited access to MICA's facilities just by being sort of a hang-arounder, but it's important to sort of put together a space for yourself to continue to create. So before I set up this studio, I had actually set up a studio in my living room in my apartment in Baltimore. And that was really great for sort of that time before I went to South Africa. And then after coming back, I wanted to set up something a little bit where I could be a little bit messier, where I could have a little bit more equipment. So on the left there, you can see when we sort of moved in, and on the right there, you can see where we finally got the floors painted and the rest of the walls up. And this studio wound up, you know, keeping me in my practice. It was not an ideal scenario. It flooded in 3 different ways from 3 different directions. I mean, it was wild. So I had a bookbinding set up there. Pretty much all I was doing there was making custom books, mostly journals, and some journals for sale. So I was going to the different markets and craft fairs and things like that around Baltimore and selling books. And also actually working at a sandwich shop during this time to sort of sustain myself and to sustain my practice. And so I had this studio for about a year when it got to the point where I really missed sort of printing. And my boyfriend at the time and I were very over winter. We're Floridians, and Baltimore's winter can be pretty harsh. So we decided that since we were both from Florida, it might be a good idea to move back down to Florida. And I started doing some research on where in Florida would potentially sustain what I was wanting to do. And I found this neighborhood where the studio is now, called Fat Village in Fort Lauderdale. And if we want to slide to that next slide, this was my studio when I first got set up. So it's about 860 square feet. It's 2 rooms. The landlord, when I was still in Baltimore, I was sort of testing a bunch of different areas. So I was putting books in a suitcase and flying to different sort of craft fairs or markets or things like that in different places. So I went to a couple here in Florida. I went to a couple in Philadelphia, just trying to see, you know, what city might be the next good move for me. And I found Fat Village through a market called the Night Owl Market, which took place during an art walk in November of 2013. And I loved the area. I loved the vibe of the whole event. And so I asked one of the artists who had a studio here, Sri Prabha, who's actually now based in Hollywood, but he's a fantastic artist. If you don't know his work, definitely check his work out. And he was kind enough to give me the landlord's information for the neighborhood, Doug McCraw. And so I set up a meeting with Doug McCraw to talk about getting a studio space here. And I came in with sort of a portfolio of my print work and a big bag full of books that I make. And I was telling him about all the bookbinding, and, you know, he kept saying, oh, well, have you heard of this other neighborhood, or have you talked to this other person over here? You know, sort of with a little bit of a vibe of like, we don't know if you're a good fit for the neighborhood. And then I brought out my portfolio of fine art prints, and I said, well, you know, these books are kind of what I'm doing right now, but these prints are more what I want to do as the studio evolves. And, you know, I have this experience doing collaborative printing. This is really what I want the dream to be. And after he took a look at some of my prints, he said, oh, well, we do have this one space, but it's not quite built out yet. And so they actually added this glass storefront door that you see in the top right picture there. They built a bathroom for me to have in the studio. They painted all the walls and the floors and the ceiling. And so by July of 2014, I was able to sign the lease and get the keys. And by August, I was able to start moving in. And then we opened at the end of September, so September 27th, 2014. And so that 860 square feet, I brought down presses and type and everything that I could get my hands on in sort of the Northeast, and put it all into a pod and moved it down to Florida, and we started the studio. One thing that was really interesting is that South Florida doesn't really have as much of an industrial history of printing, or just really industrial industry at all, because it was, you know, sort of a vacation location. It wasn't really where a lot of companies were setting up and building. So there's not, finding these presses that, you know, you use for letterpress printing and things like that is actually a lot more difficult down here, just because there was less of them here when they were in use. A lot of the presses that I use were pretty much defunct by the 1970s. So if there wasn't an industry for it here by the 1970s, then you're not really going to find a whole lot of that equipment here. So it's always been kind of a hunt and a search, and it's like national treasure, right? We're always like looking for presses and cool new things. And so we opened our doors in 2014. It was just me in the studio for a while. And then, you know, 2015, we were able to start kind of expanding and growing. 2016, we took on an additional 1,300 square feet. And if you want to roll to the next slide, I've got some pictures of a little bit more what the studio, what we've added on here. So in 2018, we were able to take over the space next door, and our landlords cut a hole in the wall for us so that we could get in between the two spaces easily. So on the left there, you can see our printmaking studio, or our screen printing studio. And we brought on new staff members. In the bottom right there, you can see Sammy McLean, an FAU grad, who is our gallery and education manager. So she handles our gallery exhibitions, as well as our workshops and things like that we have here at the studio. And one project that I've been really proud of for sort of the duration of our studio, I started this project in 2015 with Edwin Beauchamp, who is a artist based in Miami. He's an illustrator and designer. He works for DAPRA in the design district. And I met him at the Miami Zine Fair in 2015. And we sort of stayed in touch, and he said, you know, if you ever want to do a collaboration or if you ever want to work on something together, I would love that. And so I sort of said, oh, what the heck, let's figure something out. And so I started our Existent Books artist book publishing program, which has since expanded. We can go on to that next slide there. So in the bottom middle there on Vandercook, that's Edwin printing, test printing some of his plates for that first book that we printed. And we actually got Knight funding. The Knight Foundation in Miami generously helped to fund the Existent Books program in 2019 for the next 2 years. So we were able to expand our programming to a 2-week residency that happens during the summer with 2 different artists. And we also bring in a guest critic or 2 guest critics to take a look at the artist's work, to sort of bounce ideas off of, to give suggestions, and just to see the project in general. So you can see me and Michelle Miller, who is a resident over this past summer, 2020. We sort of did a very socially distant residency. In the top right there, you can see Chachi working on editioning some of Onajide's books. And in the bottom right, you can see Onajide chatting with Rachel Gustafson, who is a visiting critic from the Norton Museum of Art. She's a curator there. And she came down to take a look at what the artists were working on and to have a conversation with them about their work. So if we can hop to the next slide, you can actually see some of the editions that we worked on. These are in chronological order. So we started out doing, we were gonna swap between local artists and visiting artists. So the first book, Disarray by Edwin Beauchamp, Miami-based. The second book is called Devoted by Beth Sheehan, who was based in New York at the time. Beth is a fantastic book and print artist. And she came down from New York for a week and we did a residency and it was a lot of fun. But, you know, sort of looking at all of the artists that were in South Florida, it actually made a lot of sense to continue to work with South Florida artists specifically. So from Brian onward, we worked with South Florida artists. So we've got Brian Butler up at the top there, Noah Levy in the bottom left, Jen Clay in the middle there, and Lisa Batista. And then on the next slide, we've got some of the more recent projects. Christian Fennick, who is based here in Broward, and Michelle Miller's Convergence, which we saw her in that previous slide. And then Onajide Shabaka as Antillian Lacune. So this is a project that we hope to continue doing. We actually have more, another residency scheduled for this summer. So we'll have 2 artists in the studio making books and sort of going through that collaborative process. And then we'll get into the editioning a little later on in the summer and hopefully debut the books in the fall of this year. So lots of fun going on in the studio there. I'm gonna pop to that next slide. I'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we've been doing outside of the studio. So in 2016, I was approached by Sarah Michelle Rupert, who you can see there in the blue shirt. She was the gallery director at the Girls Club collection here in Fort Lauderdale. And she reached out because Girls Club was doing an exhibition called Self-Proliferation, which was some relatively print focused, and they were interested in possibly doing some type of book or zine fair. And they knew that I was a printmaking and book art studio and thought maybe we could partner on this fun project. And so we went sort of back and forth for a few months and we were sort of figuring out how we wanted to run it. And eventually I said, well, let's call it SPF for Small Press Fair, and let's have it be include prints, books, and zines, anything sort of in multiples on paper. And so we debuted our first SPF 16 in November of 2016. And it was fantastic. I mean, we had almost 100 exhibitors. We had over 500 people come through. We had a steamroller printing demonstration. We had print demonstrations that are going on all throughout the fair. And since then, we've just continued to expand this program. If any of y'all are print inclined here, I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't yet. FAU actually has a pretty big part in the fair as well, having a table and doing print demos and all those fun things. So I encourage any of you to apply to be a part of it, or at least to come down and hang out with us during the second Saturday of the month, second Saturday of November. So this year, I believe that's going to be November 13th. And so Sarah and I, we worked really, really well together. And one of my other dreams was to see a more fine art book fair happening here in South Florida. And so in 2019, Sarah and I worked together to write an application for the Night Arts Challenge, which is actually what we got that Existent Books grant through as well. If you want to pop to the next slide. We started Tropic Bound. So Tropic Bound is an artist's book fair that will be coming to Miami in February 2022. It looks like we're going to be in the Moore building in the Design District, which we're very, very excited about. This is going to be an every other year type of fair celebrating artists' books, which if y'all are unfamiliar with that term, all of those existent books that I showed you earlier are artist books. The difference between an artist book and an art book or a fine art book or a book in general is that an artist's book is a book that is also a piece of art in itself. So it's a book and it's art at the same time. So I recommend you guys marking your calendars February 23rd through the 25th, 2022 at the Moore building in the Design District. We'll have a lot of programming coming up, a lot of great information coming up on that very soon. You can follow us on Instagram at Tropic Bound Fair. And SPF is on Instagram at SPF FTL as in Fort Lauderdale. And now we've actually gotten to the fun part of this tour. So if you want to pop onto the next slide. You guys want to see what the dream looks like? Do you want to see the studio? I know you guys are all on mute, but I'm imagining you probably want to see what the studio looks like. So why don't we go ahead and stop this screen share, and maybe I can be sort of the main talking head on here, and I can take you guys around the studio for a little tour. So actually, I guess I'll keep it on vertical so you guys can see what's going on here. Can everybody see me okay? Everybody can hear me okay? Excellent. So I'm going to pop my mouse. Sorry, let me set this back down here. We're on the phone because of the technical difficulties that we had earlier. So I'm gonna pop my mask back on because there are other people in the studio here today and we are keeping things very safe. But if you guys have any trouble hearing me, just let me know and I will maybe hold my face closer to the phone, but I will continue to be masked. So go for a quick journey around the studio. Whoops. I'm going to flip my camera around. So here I am. See, I've been following along on the demonstration here. I'm going to start from sort of where the staff would enter the studio. So remember that first, the 800 square space that I was telling you about. This is the door that we had put in for us special. And it opens up into our fine art room, also known as the FAR room. So you can see we've got two big etching presses. That's Mary and Myron. Mary has a bed that's about 43 by about 72. So you can print really, really big prints there. Myron has a huge bed as well. I thought that this press was huge when I got it. Myron actually came down from Toronto from Don Black Line Casting. This press has been in movies in Canada, just a fun fact. So all of the fine art printing happens back here, etching, intaglio, mono printing, all that good stuff. This is our foil room. So we have our foil press there, the big Kensal K50, paper drill, paper cutters, all paper full in these flat files here, a big mess because we're always working on a bunch of different things. And it looks like I can see the chat. So if I'm going too fast or anything, please let me know. The next room that we're going to walk through, this is actually, maybe I'll back up here so I can just show you. So this big hole that you see in the wall here, that was from the first expansion that we did. That was Jess Condon and I. We sort of karate kicked the wall down. There you can see where that wall used to be. And then we took over this space. So this is now the letterpress room. So we have the big Heidelberg windmill. We've got the two Vandercooks, the SP15, which was my very first press, also came down from Toronto. And then we have the SP20, that's Sam, which came down from West Orange, New Jersey, when we purchased an entire letterpress shop called Vote for Letterpress that was up in West Orange. And so we also have George, the big 10 by 15 Charles CNP, Chandler and Price, sorry, not Charles brand, Chandler and Price press, some baby presses for workshops, more baby presses for workshops. All of these cabinets that you see over here are full of lead and wood type, antique, beautiful, gorgeous stuff. And this is sort of my collection here, these three cabinets and those two cabinets. And then when we bought the Selikoff collection, we got all these beautiful 8 cabinets here, as well as a couple more in the back. In the gallery here, you can see Sammy and Jennifer Prince here installing a new show. Wave hi, guys. So this is our exhibition space in the front. There you guys get a super exclusive preview of the exhibition that will be opening later, a little bit later this month, I think next week probably. And then again, this big old hole in the wall here was cut in for us when we took over the space next door. So this is our screen printing facility. So we have big old film printer for screen printing, inks, and then our screen presses, which are a little bit messy in here. This is our most commonly used room. We have our dark room in here, so we can do our exposing. There's some of the screens there. Our exposure unit can handle a screen up to 34 by 48. So we tend to do a lot of the sort of larger scale printing. These are some of the test prints that we had there. This is our main screen printing press and AWT AccuGlide. And then up front here, Kato is tip tapping away, sending out quotes and emails to customers who are interested in having things printed. We have our retail area, our sort of desk area. That's where I normally sit. And we have our consultation area, which actually I need to get a couple of these lights replaced. You can see it's a little dark over here, but very nice when, you know, in non-COVID times, we can have clients come in and see materials, samples, and samples of all the different things that we do. So this is the downstairs space. In June of 2020, we actually took over the entire upstairs space, which I'm not going to, I don't have enough time to get to today because I want to make sure to leave you guys with some time for questions and things like that. So I'm going to come back over here to my computer station. And if you guys want to see the upstairs space, schedule some time to come by. So if we can go back to the slideshow, I have a couple more slides for us that I want to just blow through really quickly. You can go to the next one there. Alrighty, so on top of all of this, I am an artist. So, you know, I identify as an artist as well as a publisher and a studio director and, you know, sort of all of the different hats that I end up wearing in an event planner, right? So this is my book title. So this book was made during a residency at the Jackie Center at FAU. So I was very, very fortunate to be a resident there over the summer in 2016. And I spent all my time there making paper. I actually made paper on the beach at the Boca Inlet. So I was taking all of the pulp that I was making in the paper making studio in the was that T1 or T2 building out there, and I was putting it in my car, and I was taking all the equipment over to the beach for setting up a table and putting ocean water in the vat and pulling sheets of paper on the beach and getting sunburned and talking to people in Speedos, and it was fantastic. And then I took all that paper and made this book called Title, which you can see on my website if you want to see more of, but we're gonna flip on to the next one. So that connection with the ocean and sort of connection with place when making art really stuck with me after that residency. And so a lot of my art since then has been sort of finding ways to sort of be in other places when making art, which is ironic because I have this big, beautiful studio where I could make art, but I choose to mostly make art sort of offsite and in other places. So these are also handmade paper works. These were made on the beach, the one on the right in Naples, Florida, and the one on the left in Fort Lauderdale here. So I prepared pulp at the Jaffe Center and drove it in my car to these locations. And I actually, instead of using a mold and decal, like how you would normally make paper, I actually poured this pulp directly onto the surface of the shore, so directly onto the sand. And all of the water that's in the pulp slurry escaped down through the sand, and all of the paper pulp stayed on the surface of the sand. And so I was essentially making sheets of paper with the shore. And so these pieces were in an exhibition actually here at the studio in November and December called Water Draws Itself. And it was sort of my way of helping water find sort of a new way to make a portrait of itself. That's why these are portrait orientation and sort of have that old school cameo or old style mirror quality to them. And then in the next slide, you can see a couple of the prints that are actually in the exhibition. Oh, by the way, all of those existent books are in the exhibition at the Ritter Gallery. So if you guys want to see them up close, please go see them there. These are a couple more prints of mine that are in that exhibition as well, Surface 2 and 3. These are both lino cuts. The one on the left is an attempt at remembering how to draw the surface of the ocean without looking at it. And the one on the right is carving the surface of the ocean with a photographic reference. So you can see it's a little bit of a conversation on memory, but it's also a conversation on surface and reflection. And that's sort of where my work is now. I'm representing the surface of the ocean and landscape imagery through the portrait orientation and exploring identity and sort of self-awareness through sort of portraits of landscapes. So on the next slide here, I will go ahead and quit my yabbering and just say, keep in touch. You guys can feel free to shoot me an email if you want a more direct way to reach out, ingrid@isprojectsfl.com. Also feel free to check me out on Instagram @isprojects is the studio, where we post a bunch of cool stuff that we're working on and different workshops and things that we have going on. Or my personal Instagram is just my name, Ingrid Schindall, where I post about my art and a little bit about my life. And also definitely check out our website, isprojectsfl.com. It's got all the information on all the different stuff that we do. Nocturnal Press is also still a thing, Nocturnal Press FL or nocturnal.press online. And yeah, you can definitely see all the things that we do much closer in the exhibition. So I hope that you all get a chance to check that out. And hopefully y'all have some questions because we've got about 15 minutes here.
So people can ask questions in chat, as well as if you just want to turn your camera on and ask the question directly. So actually, on that note, I'll turn myself on. I have always lots of questions. You know, I have to say printmaking overwhelms me, and all the machines that you operate. I'm just like, I am in awe of you, Ingrid. When I first saw your facility, I just could not imagine how one person had the spirit and industry to imagine that and manifest that. So where do you get your energy and drive from? And how can you find so much energy to share it with the community in the way that you do?
I think I started IS Project super young. I was 24 when I opened the studio down here, and I was just so excited to share what I had learned sort of throughout the rest of my life with South Florida, because there wasn't really a lot of printmaking facilities or resources available here. So I was just really excited to have a letterpress shop that was set up that people could use. And then after that, I think it's really inertia, to be honest with you. Like once you have sort of a certain amount of things and a certain amount of people that have expectations from you and things like that, you just sort of keep going. And I'm very fortunate. We've done so many amazing projects, and we get to be sort of, all of the efforts are reinforced really beautifully. The night grants were like huge boost to what we were doing here. Actually, I just started a project for O Miami Poetry Festival that'll be announced on Monday. So I can't get into too much detail with what that is, but it's a super exciting one. And so just having that reinforcement from the community and, being able to see people get really jazzed about printmaking just helps fill my cup and get me all excited to do more and more and more and more. We set up paper making upstairs, by the way. So we have a paper making facility now too.
You don't worry about water leaking down or anything like that.
We have it outside. We have it on the outside patio upstairs. So it seems to be working out okay so far, but we do have some leaks here. So that is always a question mark.
Right. So, I mean, I know that you trained as a printmaker, and then you did an internship in South Africa and gained more experiences, but how did you garner the level of experience necessary to manage the range of equipment that you're managing? And also, do you fix all that stuff?
So I think being a printmaker is sort of half being an artist, half being a technician, half being an antique collector, and half being someone that doesn't need sleep. One of the things that's actually really cool about the printmaking community is that everyone's really accessible and really happy to talk with you. So whenever I have issues with any of my presses, I have sort of a whole network of people that I can call and ask, hey, my press is doing this funny thing. Like, what do you think that's all about? And they'll either have a solution for me or help me brainstorm, or I'll do like a deep dive on Google and try to find some more information there. Or so I do fix most of the machines that we have here. This one, the Kensal behind me, I actually hired someone to come and sort of get it set up for me, which that was great. Eddie Fontus, he does like letterpress equipment repair, and he fixed up our foil press as well. So we're lucky to have sort of a network of people that we can reach out to when things start going wrong.
And I know that you have a really big mission with your studio, and that is to engage community and educate. So can you talk a little bit about why that's important to you?
Oh, totally. A big part of, I've always thought of artists, I don't know if this is sort of a shared opinion, but I've always thought of artists as sponges. So we sort of like suck everything up that we can find and then sort of filter it through our brains or our ideas and passions, and then sort of give back a thing that sort of developed through that sponge. And so I am one of those people, I really love like geeky facts and things like that. And I love printmaking as sort of a historical medium. And so the only way I think to help printmaking and letterpress and book arts and things like that stay relevant is to get people really excited about them here and now. So actually the mission of the studio is to instill a love of paper, ink, and craft in current and future generations. So with existent books, we do that by encouraging artists who maybe have not worked in book medium before, or who are also just really into book medium, to make things that are really interesting that help to keep that media relevant, and also to stimulate evolution of that medium. Like just because book arts was traditionally XYZ doesn't mean it has to be XYZ forever. Maybe moving into the future, it starts to become ABC, and there's things are always sort of shifting and changing. And my interest is not so much necessarily in keeping everything exactly as it was, but keeping everything alive and helping to sort of move it into the future and keep it relevant that way. So education has become really important as just the vehicle for getting people excited and getting people invested in these media.
Yeah, I do hope that people will make their way over to the Ritter and be able to see the actual work and see both the craft and the beauty and the intimacy of it. So I know I sort of take over all the questions, and I'm not noticing any questions in chat. So if you have a question, you can put it in chat or turn on your camera and turn on your mic and ask it.
I won't bite, I promise.
Because I must admit, I was very curious about your facility and what was going on. I was hearing buzz. So Marjorie, you have a question.
Yes, I have a question for IS projects. Yes, I wonder if, was that some of like your portfolio work?
Yeah,
like
so that's,
portfolio as well? Oh.
Yeah, so that's my personal work.
Okay.
The books that I was showing earlier on in the presentation were the existent books project. So that was through the studio. And then the work towards the end of the presentation is my personal artwork or my personal practice.
Okay.
And so Ingrid, if people are interested in learning more about you, they can go to your website. And then when things open up more, certainly they can come and visit the studio.
Yes.
But I understand you also have a lot of workshops and other things going on, which you had to tailor to the year of COVID and you moved stuff online. But when might we expect that there could be those wonderfully intimate in-person workshops again?
So all of us here at the studio are under 35 and relatively healthy. So we're towards the end of the list for vaccines, but as soon as all of us are vaccinated here, we'll start having a lot more options for workshops. We're hoping to start doing some private, like 1 and 2 person workshops a little bit sooner rather than later, but we haven't made that proper announcement yet. We actually have a newsletter on our website where we will make announcements like that. So we're open right now to very limited studio rental. It's 1 person a day and only a couple people a week to just keep the exposure as minimal as possible. We're trying to be really as safe as possible. Fat Village, the neighborhood that we're in, has started doing art walks again, and we've actually declined to participate in those for they did the first 2, the January and February. Art walk is the last Saturday of every month. So once things start to open back up again, I do encourage you all to come out and, once everyone's safe and, once we get to that point, I do encourage everyone to come down during art walk. It's the last Saturday of the month from 6 to 11 p.m. All of the galleries and art studios in the area are open, and you can sort of walk around and see a lot of really great art and have great conversations and take a tour through the studio here and see whatever we're working on. But yeah, so if you're interested in sort of getting the first scoop on when we will be opening back up, I would recommend signing up for a newsletter or following us on Instagram. We'll probably announce it there as well.
Yeah, I think it's well worth following you. I want to recognize Stephanie Cunningham, who helped us out with the technology. So yay, Stephanie. And your studio has a real affinity for graphic design as well.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Okay, I want to know, what do you guys do as printmakers? Do you like do prints for books or something like that? Or?
So we do fine art printmaking in all different varieties. We do screen printing, letterpress printing. We print woodcuts for people, intaglio for people, more on sort of like the fine art end of things, but also through Nocturnal Press, we do wedding invitations, business cards, packaging, you name it. We also are a bookbinding studio, so we can help with book projects, fine art bookbinding, and pretty much anything that you would want done nicely on paper. So not those like 1,000 flyers or 2,000 business cards.
So you guys like graphic designers or something like that? Do you guys use that?
So we actually have Leah Rubin, who's another FAU grad, who is our designer currently. So we do some design work, but mainly we focus on printing.
So is it similar to graphic design where you print letters on books or whatever?
Actually, I mean, sort of throughout the slideshow, I guess I could have included more examples of work that we've done, but we do a lot of posters, fine art prints, business cards, invitations, that type of thing.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And how much was it for the studio? Was it, you get a loan for a studio or something?
Well, Marky, I would suggest that you go see the show at the Ritter to see a range of what's done, as well
Okay.
as you can visit their website. And I
Okay.
see that there's no other questions. Stephanie Cunningham has something she wants to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, number one, thank you so much, Ingrid. You've been such a great addition to the community. There's in so many ways, you know, like I've had the graduates, and besides going to the SPF fair, I had the graduate students participate in the SPF fair. You know, you've had a great relationship with the art community and provided a lot of opportunities. So I really, really appreciate you and appreciate the energy that you've brought to the area, which is awesome. I have two questions. One is just sort of a really practical question. You have all this tremendously heavy equipment. Like, it is no small feat to move that from Canada. Like, how does that happen? Where does the funding come from something like that? Because it has to be ridiculously expensive. I mean, you're not like, you know, I can carry my laptop around, you know, you have all this ridiculously heavy equipment. And then my final question is just like, is it hard for you? I mean, I struggle trying to figure out, you know, how to balance all the different hats, and you seem to be wearing so many and they're really diverse. And like, how do you make time for your own practice?
Yeah, thanks. Those are great questions. Very practical questions too. I mean, I think the most the most practical advice that I can give someone who wants to have a business like this is to invest $250 in a pallet jack from Northern Tool or Harbor Freight, because that has been like sort of our go-to for moving things around the shop, or find a friend who has one that works too. We used the one here in Fat Village for a while, and then it sort of made more sense to have our own. But all of the equipment that we have is very heavy, and it does take a lot to move it. I've been very lucky to have sort of a team of friends and family and community support and people that wanted to sort of help with moving a lot of these things. And it looks like a ton of stuff now, but I've been doing this for almost 7 years. So it's accumulated somewhat gradually. I wouldn't say that, you know, we sort of came into it with 50,000 pounds. Actually, when I moved my pod down from Baltimore, I think it was about 15,000 pounds, which is like the max for what you can do on a pod, which was like a whole funny separate story that I won't get into right now. But some of the equipment moves easier than others. You know, the paper cutters and things like that, they move really easy with a pallet jack, where like the big CMP is a total pain, and you have to move it like an Egyptian with like lead rollers underneath it, like total like pain in the butt. So we just try not to move those pieces of equipment as often as some of the other stuff. And we've been very fortunate with the studio here. Our landlord, Doug McCraw, is very motivated to sort of keep us here. So we haven't had to actually move out of a space yet. We've just sort of taken on additional spaces, which is, I'm just so grateful and feel so fortunate to not have had to do that so much. And then your second question, which has flown out of my mind right now, I apologize.
I was asking about how you balance, like how do you find time for your own practice?
Yes. So I am totally one of those people that does better with a deadline. So actually the most effective way I found to sort of keep my practice going is to apply for things, whether that's residencies or exhibitions, or, you know, even sometimes like just finding an opportunity, say like Print Austin this last year. I was really motivated by it. I actually didn't end up applying for it because I wasn't quite happy with the work that came from sort of what I was hoping to do for it. But just having that deadline in mind of the Print Austin application or the South Florida Cultural Consortium applications, those I found as like hugely motivating for continuing to work on my own stuff. As far as finding time for it, that is a little bit more difficult. I tend to work, you know, sort of evenings and weekends. I like doing projects that I can work on a little bit from home. So all of those lino cuts I've carved sort of while like either while watching TV or listening to a podcast or something that's like a little bit relaxing too, sitting at my kitchen table and sort of like looking at my garden, or, you know, something kind of like nice like that, and just trying to find ways that work for me to continue to like make progress on things. And so, yeah, so deadlines are great, and finding things that you like to work on sort of in a little bit more relaxing context, I think help as well. And then when the push finally comes, then you get to work and do the push. So yeah, it's a lot of work though. I mean, I tell people I don't have a pet. I don't really have hobbies. I do printmaking and book arts, and but I really enjoy doing what I do. It kind of is like, it's a lifestyle, it's hobbies, it's all of those things sort of wrapped into one. It's my livelihood. And I'm, very fortunate to have a team here that really gets it and also enjoys doing this type of nerdy stuff too. We have 5 employees now. We've got Sammy McLean, who's an FAU grad. We have Leah Rubin, also an FAU grad. We have Alexandra Riesco, who's a Dartmouth grad. And we have Caro Gutierrez, who just started on as our sales and fulfillment associate. So we've got a great team, and we just have a lot of fun and handle a lot of paper.
Well, we're hitting the end of the hour, and I must say that this has been so inspiring. I am not in my 30s or even 40s, so I don't think I'm going to start a printmaking studio. But boy, I give it to you, Ingrid, and for all those people who are online with us now. You can live your dream if you put in the work, and I admire you greatly for what you have achieved and what you are contributing to the South Florida arts arena and beyond. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to people for joining in with us. And please check out the exhibitions that are currently up at FAU, both at the Schmidt Gallery and at the Ritter Gallery, and celebrate printmaking and books. Yay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Miss Carol, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark Reed.
I want to know if you guys have like any hyperrealism sculpture classes here at FAU.
Oh, you could talk to me this afternoon in class, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I see Tom Virgin is here. So another wonderful printmaking studio. That's lovely to see you, Tom, again. Very supportive. So I love the community of printmakers. They're all supportive of each other. So please check out Ingrid's website and come to our next talk and celebrate the art that's around us. And as much as we can join together on Zoom, I think this is great. So thank you so much, Ingrid, for your contribution to the exhibition, to the community, and to this talk. Okay, bye.